Naturally, as Will's grandmother, I visited Will in hospital on the first day that he was born. James, Will's father, handed him to me, wrapped in a little blue blanket. I'll never forget that moment. He was such a handsome baby. James ran 3 London pubs in the 1980s, of that punk sort. He looked awful with that leather jacket and those sort of things. That's not the sort of thing for children. So I would babysit as often as possible to make sure he had someone normal in his life. Will's birth wasn't very easy, but he got here. He was never going to have brothers or sisters after, though. Sharon, Will's mother, broke up with James for 3 years at one point and took Will away to America, where she comes from. They had met through James's work. No wonder, really. James and Sharon both loved so-called music, and there was always something playing around Will. I thought it was an awful racket, personally, but there's no accounting for tastes. I turned it off when I was babysitting. Sharon was always reading. She taught art history. Never really made much money. It's good for a young boy to be outdoors, but Will never really liked that when he was young. James had horror books in the house, and I'm so glad they were kept on a high shelf away from Will. Terrible things. I just don't understand what pleasure there is in that kind of story. I loved Will. I always just wanted him to have the best possible start and to be successful. I suppose I sound awful, saying his parents were doing everything wrong. I remember an evening where Will was quieter than usual. At first I thought he was ill. He told me that he'd been in a fight. It started because a boy had been picking on a girl, calling her names because of her dark skin. Will had tried to stop the other boy, but he had been punched in the stomach. I asked him if he had cried, and he said yes. I told him that big boys don't cry. I remember him asking me then, what do big boys do when they're sad? When he was grown up, I told him he would be a good man. He would be able to stand up to others. Even though he was hurt, I told him he was right to try to stop the bully. Now I think about this, he didn't seem much happier. What should I have said? Will tripped on a toy when he was going to bed. I remember carrying him. He was trying so hard not to cry. He was so small in my arms. I've never forgotten that feeling. It's most odd what sticks with you. A whole patchwork of memories making up our lives. I took him to bed to read him a story. He liked ghost stories, but I thought he was too young for them. He would get very scared after the light was out. Sharon kept on buying him more, though. He would never settle properly until I had checked the room for ghosts. I always looked carefully to reassure him. I remember that night clearly. I remember promising him that I would always protect him, no matter whatever happened. Of course, he was thinking of ghosts still, but maybe I knew then that his life wasn't going to be so easy. I wasn't reading a new ghost book. I was reading him Grimm's fairy tales. The old stories are much better than these new ones. That night was a strange story called The Ungrateful Son. It went something like this. Once upon a time, a man and his wife were eating a roast chicken for dinner. When the man saw his father, who was very old, walking up the road towards them, the man didn't want to share, and so he hid the chicken out of sight. His father came, bid them a good day, and went on his way. The man was happy with himself and told his wife to get the chicken and put it on the table again. But the chicken had transformed into a giant toad, which leapt onto the face of the man. The toad would never leave, and when his wife wanted to help, she was so afraid of it that she dared not go near. The man had to feed the toad every day from then on, or it would bite his face, and he never rested for the remainder of his life. Like I say, it was a very strange story. Will was asleep before I finished it, which was probably a good thing. I felt strange after reading it. I wondered about whether I really could keep him safe. I didn't know where life was going to take him. I was his grandmother, and I hoped I would help him be a good man. I could still see him sleeping there now, like it was only yesterday. I had raised James, so I thought I would be ready for anything from my grandson Will. But I wasn't daft enough to think that it would be easy. The world changes so fast. I remember the family visiting me when Will was a teenager. Me sometimes. I started a small collection of glass animals many years ago. I would buy a new one whenever I went to Brighton. It's good to get out of the house, enjoy the fresh sea air. My husband Robert was a writer, like Will. I think they would have loved talking. Maybe Will's interest would have inspired Robert to push a bit harder in his work. After James had grown up, I went to New Zealand to visit distant family over there. It was a very long trip in those days, but it's important to keep in touch. We're all so spread apart in our lives now, don't you think? Back then, Diana had just done that interview, and so we were all waiting for the divorce. There was no way we thought that they could stay together. Sometimes people treat us old people like we have nothing to say, so I started the conversation.
I think it's sad. She was bullied into all of this from the beginning.
I could have handled the rest of the conversation better. I lost my temper a bit. Sharon didn't join in, but it wasn't hard to imagine what an American might think of it all. James took Will's side on it all. He always would be difficult in those kinds of things. I wish I hadn't even tried. They didn't want to hear my views. I said that I was going to make some tea. No one offered to help. I didn't really want tea. I don't think they wanted it either. But I needed to do something. I suppose all this seems like a strange thing to remember, but it was a sad day for me. I was used to James, and of course Sharon being difficult, but not Will like that. These days it's easier to be different, to forge your own path or something like that, and everyone else be damned. We didn't have all these choices, and we all turned out well enough. If you go against society, you always end up in trouble. I was scared for him. He had all these views about things, and it was dangerous. Will was only at the start of his life, but those years are so important. I wanted him to keep his head down, not start arguments. I stood there, waiting for the tea to brew. And I cried. He was so headstrong, and he was going to make mistakes. I knew it, but I couldn't change his mind. I knew something had been broken that day between Will and I. I took a deep breath and pulled myself together. It simply doesn't do to let others see you get upset.